Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the TechStandUp podcast. This is actually probably the very first video cast that I'm doing. I actually was going to do another one earlier in the week here, however, I messed up the video editing. I failed. Read my blog post on moving past failure. So here we are. I have my guest, Aaron Strong. I'm sorry, whenever I hear your last name, Aaron, I think of Strong. Well, Aaron and I are both out here at Storage Field Day 17. So Aaron, please tell us about yourself.
Well, thanks, Luigi, for having me on. Aaron Strong, I'm a consultant. You can find me on the Twitters at @TheAaronStrong, and I have a blog at theaaronstrong.com.
Now, Aaron, I got to ask you real quick. Is your logo like you lifting stuff, kind of like my buddy IT Muscle has he's like this jack thing?
No, he's too buff for me. I don't nothing like that.
Okay, well, since we are out here at Storage Field Day 17.
17.
I can't believe it's been 17 Storage Field Days.
How many? Is this your first one?
No, this is my actual second Storage Field Day. I was out at Storage Field Day 16 out in Boston. I didn't do any video out there. Again, this is a new medium for me. But this is my second Storage Field Day. I did Tech Field Day 16, and then I've done a couple other of the extras.
Cool.
And then I'm also going to be out at another extra in about a month or so. But what I actually wanted to talk about today is specifically the presentation that we saw with Komprise. Now, Komprise is a data management company, brand new startup, only about 60 employees out there, so they're fairly new. They don't have a large Twitter following, so if you want, give them a follow. But it makes you start to think, right? So you have all these new companies coming out. If we look at like Rubrics, Cohesity, even some of the traditional backup vendors, Veeam, HP, or now Micro Focus. There's a trend within what it used to be data protection. Data protection is now, scratch that, in data management.
Right. Yeah.
What's your take on data management?
So data management, you need to understand where you're putting your data now. And some of that is mandatory from a regulatory perspective, like the GDPR. So
you just swore at so many people. So many people that will watch this are just cringed when you say GDPR.
Right, but you have to. We're being forced now to understand more about where we are, not only the data, but where we putting that data.
But so you brought up a valid point with GDPR, and that puts a lot of stress on many companies worldwide now, not just companies in the EU, right? But doesn't that, not even just GDPR, isn't just compliance in general have some sort of play with that?
It is. There are, and I think compliance is very difficult. So that's why you're seeing all these new technologies, these new startups that are coming, because compliance is hard. It's difficult when you have petabytes of data, and you need to know where you're putting that data.
All right. So since we are talking about Komprise, how do you see what Komprise does affecting, helping, or negatively impacting users for, we'll just use GDPR in this case?
Right. So I think it's going to really help users, I guess, more from like a system admin and from the business perspective, because the business needs to know where that data is coming down to. Yep. And so you have to give the right tools to your systems administrators. So that way when the lawyers come down and say, hey, where is Steve's email that we're being subpoenaed for, you need to know where that information is coming from.
Okay, so you touched on a different part of data management, right?
Okay.
It's e-discovery.
Yeah.
It's a little different than the compliance side. Now, during the presentation, so for the viewers here, I will eventually link a blog post to the actual full presentation. We completely messed up the story. We forgot to tell them exactly what Komprise does on a high level. It's basically a data mover with policies built in place. Right? And those policies and the data movement from the primary storage off to secondary cheapest storage, and data that hasn't been accessed recently, right? You're talking over a year. I guess you can set a retention policy.
There are policies.
A policy that says if this data hasn't been touched in, we'll say, for example, a year.
Right.
Move it to here.
Correct.
Where the GDPR piece comes in, it says, well, it already indexes all that data via metadata, and it says, hey, Aaron Strong's name is in an email here, and it talks about this, or he's on this mailing list or this database, and we need to purge him for the right to privacy or no contact, whatever the GDPR regulation is, I forget off the top of my head. That's where it comes in play. They can then take that, remove that data from the backups, and I guess put it like in a little container, just so it knows that nothing else can access that snippet of information, right? And then from there, once you know that that data is removed from the data sets, you can then purge it.
Right.
That's where the difference. Now, the great part that you brought up, and I do like, having come from the InfoGov side, the compliance or the e-discovery aspects. And e-discovery is huge for organizations, is where you can search for Aaron Strong or Luigi Danicos in an email, and say, we need to make sure we retain that information, and where does it actually subside?
Right. Correct. Yes. And you also forgot there was also the cloud organizer. It was organizer, right? Or orchestrator. That you can stand up within AWS, and you can read in that data, and then do some sort of. I think future release was going to do some analytics then on that data.
I'm going to back this camera up because we just had someone else join us. We have Joe Houghes. Hopefully you can see all of us. Joe,
howdy.
Please briefly just tell people where they can contact you.
So I'm at jhughes on Twitter or at fullstackgeek.net.
Okay, so Joe, just to bring you into speed in the conversation here, we're talking about data management, and specifically we're talking about the company Komprise that we watched today during this Storage Field Day 17 presentation.
Yep.
And so far we were just talking now about the e-discovery capabilities within that. And we briefly just touched on the GDPR.
Yes.
And how that plays in and how they can abstract the data into a separate set to say that it's not part of this data anymore.
Right.
And then you can purge that data.
Yes.
And then that's where Aaron was just talking about, is with the e-discovery piece right now.
Yeah.
Just to bring you into the conversation and give a quick recap to the people that may join in around 7 minutes of our conversation. So continue, so that he can chime in now too.
Oh, sorry. So one of the pieces that we were talking about was the cloud organizer or orchestrator within AWS that you can stand up, so that way you can actually you can read in that data and then do some sort of analytics on that information. So if you're searching for a specific file or something within the file, you can do that.
Yeah, hopefully it's actually got an ability to tap into the data stream to read some more analytics beyond you having to put in those capabilities for data tagging or any sort of data locality. And yeah, it's really interesting that they can actually pull that data out of the namespace and make sure that that's not data that can be streamed back in when they pull it back in from the cold data if somebody's able to access that.
Yeah, but so that's one of the things that I thought about was how could they use it from a security perspective,
yes,
right? And see if someone's trying to access. It makes me think of the Sony breach, right? How someone went and downloaded all that information, right? Some of that stuff probably was never accessed in years.
Yeah,
and they didn't have anything monitoring that to say, hey, all of a sudden you start to see traction of, wait, someone's trying to access these particular files. And I did like how they were able to, could potentially prevent that and restrict it. The one thing that I didn't like, and I mentioned it in the stream, was the GUI. The color scheme of the GUI. And I know it's a minor thing, the color scheme of the GUI, but to me it detracted from my attention on a little bit of what they were saying, because that green donut, as they called it, was just blah. Yeah, so I really hope that they institute it and they call it the Nerd Alert function, where you can change the color scheme. That would actually be pretty cool. I know you guys are going to watch this.
There you go.
But more importantly, we'll start with Joe here. What was one good thing you thought about of the product, and then alternately, what was one thing that you could see where they need to improve?
I liked the concept that they had of being vendor agnostic and also being, I guess, target agnostic, where within your policy definition you can determine where you want this data to go, and that they're working on the capabilities of even the archival tier, that just for the sheer cost savings on it, that you could put even your colder data out to long-term storage, such as Glacier, rather than landing on S3. And just the fact that they seem to already have their heads around the fact that they needed to both input and output completely vendor agnostic. As far as things that I think that they need to improve on, it seems like maybe they just need a little bit more definition around what their next steps are. Even to their point that you had asked about the release cycle, and you were just trying to figure out like where exactly they're going. They need to maybe have a little bit more of a story of like what are the next steps, what are their next big targets they're trying to achieve.
Okay. Same question to you. What did you like about, at least one thing that you liked about today, and then one thing that you could see a little bit of improvement on?
Yeah, I think I really liked the cloud orchestrator. I think that was a good component, so that way you don't have to bring that data back in on premises to do that analytics information.
Yep.
And then the UI, you'd say, is probably a good tweak to do because a lot of times the technology is great, but some decisions are made off of the interface. So clean up the interface a little bit. The other thing I did like, in addition to, was there's a director and then there's the orchestrator. Mm-hmm. And the director can either be a SaaS model or an on-premises model. Yep. And I think that gives the product more flexibility.
That was a good decision that they planned in from the very beginning. Right. But yeah, it's a very good point that both of you guys make about the UI. It's like at a glance, that may make or break somebody looking at the product.
It does, because I can tell you from past with Data Protector, when I was working with HP in the backup space, that GUI is terrible. It's like Windows 95 terrible. So I guess I'm a little partial, right? People want a good user experience. Sure. And now we didn't get to play around with the GUI, we only saw a brief demo of it. So for me, one of the good things I like is it's really copy data management, yes, in a sense, with some enhanced policies and how you can control it. But also, I would have liked to have seen, and I'm starting with the bad first, I would have liked to have seen a little more about the analytical piece behind it, yeah, right? Because that's really what matters in today's world is, we were talking about this on the podcast that we recorded earlier, is being able to use that data for actionable insights for better business value, right? I would like to see how Komprise could utilize that type of vision, right? I didn't get the full story from what we saw today. I was excited about the approach of, from a business value, of how you could potentially save money within an organization by moving that stuff away from your primary stores, which is more expensive, to that secondary stores. And the one thing that they support tape, right? Which not many people still talk about, but tape is not dead. No, by any means.
It's very important.
So, real quick, since we're going to be wrapping this up, any last words?
I would say, honestly, just for the folks that Komprise, the fact that even as engineers, we kind of looked at the UI and we're like, ooh, man, that's something you should really take a second look at. And just the fact that, again, more refining the story for them, it needs to be like, here's the additional business value. Here's the cost savings, but then here's all the other things you can do now that we have the metadata about what's in there. Or I think they said even the metadata. So, yeah.
I would agree with the last part about the telling a story to make that a little bit more polished. Yep. Businesses are looking for solutions and for the answers, and for the presentation today, we went right into some of the technology versus like what are the problems that we have. Here's our product, this is the solution to it, and now we get into the technology part.
Yeah, I would agree with you. They were very straightforward and to the point. The one thing that I enjoyed was that it was the 4 founders of the product they were talking about it, right? And I guess the marketing guy or the marketing side of me was curious about why they came up with, how they came up with the name. And I do like how they've had a long history, standing history, and they keep that tradition going, right? And they did seem very receptive to some ideas. So remember, the color change scheme in the GUI, call it the blurt mode.
Nice.
Well, that is all. We're coming to you live. This was recorded live at Storage Field Day 17 out in San Jose. Check out the video, give us a comment, a like, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and follow these guys. Thank you. Until next time.